Hello, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to my tutorial on Zelle Chapter 6. In this particular recording, it's going to be on Exercise 2 of a set of custom exercises that I created because I didn't like the ones in the book. So let's take a look at what's in my PyCharm Edu editor. The file that I've created is called tutorial for exercise 2.py. And the skill that we're trying to demonstrate is we want to demonstrate both parameter passing. So let's say parameter passing and value returning. Okay. So then, so we want to pass parameters down from the calling code and return values up from the called code. Okay, pretty basic function things, pretty basic subroutine capabilities in computer languages for 50, 60 years. Okay, so what's the example that we're going to do here for the tutorial? Well, we're going to take some code that I already have from a prior tutorial, one from chapter 2, actually. And this is a code that converts measurement from inches to centimeters and prints the result. Okay, and we want to refactor it such that it does the input and the output in the main function. That's the way it currently works, while doing the conversion calculation in the subfunction. And that's not the way it currently works. Excuse me. So let's go. I just happen to have a copy of this open in another editor, and I'm just going to take that code and I'm going to copy it over here and paste it in. And so what we have is sort of a naive version, okay, a not well factored version of the conversion of inches to centimeters. Okay, great. So let's give this a test run. What is the measurement in inches? So let's say 5. It says that, the measurement is 12.7 centimeters. Okay, well that looks fine. All right. Well, what don't we like about this? Why do we need to do some more factoring? One thing I see is we could probably use another blank line between the definition for main and the called main. That's probably going to look better when we go and inspect our code, right? Well, here's the thing. The code for this kind of conversion is pretty general code that we might be doing a lot within our application. Well, let's say that we are. We have a very inches and centimeters centric application. We're doing this all over the place for some crazy reason. And what we want is we want to create a common function that we can share. We could put it into a module and we could import the module and share it, and then we would be able to use the same code in various programs. Okay. The way it is right now, it's not too hard to get the calculation, but this does a really a particular thing. It prompts to get the input from the console. It does the calculation, and then it prints the answer on the console. You could think of all kinds of other permutations where that weren't console based. Like if we wanted to do this in a batch kind of application, then maybe all the measurements in inches on the input side would be coming in on an input file, and maybe all the measurements in centimeters on the output side would be going out on some kind of output file. And so we would want to be able to create a a function for converting inches to centimeters that could be used by both of those. So we really want to take the conversion calculation and separate it from the getting of the input and the writing of the output. So how could we do this? Well, let's extract this into a method. Okay. All right. So we have centimeters equals inches times 2.54. And let's just do this one by hand, because sometimes when you try this stuff, it's a little confusing. So let's just do a def on this. So we want to we want to define a method, and let's call it inches to cm. Okay. And we want to have a parameter list with formal parameters. Okay, and what do we want? Well, we want to pass in inches. So there's going to be a formal parameter whose name is inches. Okay. Now, one of the things that I'd like to really highlight when I write my function code, we're going to be calling a function from a function. Right? The high-level function is main. Lower-level function is inches to cm. You could call inches to cm a sub-function or a level 2 function. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to illustrate that we don't have access to the same variables unless we explicitly pass parameters. So how could I show that? Well, what I typically use is I use a different name for my formal parameter. Okay, so I'm going to call this inches underscore in, because this is kind of an input. Okay, all right, and we're going to need a colon there. All right. Okay. So let's do this the long way, and then we'll shorten it up. Okay. So let's say, okay, well, what we want to do is we want to calculate centimeters. Okay. And let's call, again, we're going to use a longer name just to prove we're not using the variables that we have in main. Okay. In fact, and so instead of calling it inches in, let's just use the same scheme all over. Let's call this one my inches. Okay? This is the inches that applies to this function. So let's calculate my centimeters. My centimeters equals my inches times 2.54. All right. Well, that looks like it'll work. Now, I want you to really focus on the fact that we are not referencing the variable inches from main directly. We're not? No. Because we're going to pass this as an actual parameter, and then that actual parameter, the value from that is going to be passed and put into the parameter value within the function of my inches. So they'll have the same value, but they won't be the same object. Okay, so that looks interesting. Okay, what if I wanted to use inches? Would that work? Let's see. No, that doesn't work. Why? It doesn't work because variables have this thing called a scope. Okay, it's the range of code over which they're known. Okay, and inches has the scope of the function main. So in the function inches to cm, that variable inches from main is not in scope. Okay, so you can try to refer to it all you want, and you can. Okay, now this is a good thing because one, it allows you whenever you write a function to to use the names that really apply to that function and not have to worry about, well, have I already used that in a different function? Each function has its own scope of names and kind of a namespace. So typically inches that we define in one function are not the inches that are going to be in the other function. Well, I'm going to want to match them up somehow. How do they match up? Well, they match up through the parameter list. So let's go back and say my inches, which is what we want, my underscore inches. And here in the call to code, inches to cm, that makes sense. Now we still don't know how that's going to work. So let's come up here and say centimeters equals, and how we're going to do this? Well, we're going to do a call. We're going to call inches to cm, and we're going to pass the actual parameter that's going to be matched up with the formal parameter that we have down here. So this is going to take my inches is going to get its own copy of whatever value is associated with inches when we pass it in. So that's why we're going to be able to, when we do our calculation, we're going to be multiplying it times the right value. Okay, well, let's try this. This isn't going to work, but let's explore why. So we're going to run this. And what's the measurement in inches? Well, let's say 2 again. And it says the measurement is none in centimeters. That's weird. So it turns out that none is a special kind of object. And we typically use it to signify that we ordinarily would have an object here, but we don't have one yet. So it's kind of empty. In some computer languages, similar value is called null. In others, it's called nil. In some, it's called empty. Here in Python, we call it none. Okay. All right. So what's happening? Well, when we do this call, what's the value of this call that gets passed back? Because aren't we assigning that value to centimeters? Yeah. Well, we're not returning a value. And when you don't return any value, implicitly, your code in turn returns none. Oh, well, we're going to have to return a value. So let's just say, okay, well, we have to explicitly return my centimeters. Okay, return with a U, not an E. Okay, so let's see how that runs. We're going to run it, and let's make it big again. So 2 inches, 5.08 centimeters. Well, that looks about right. 5.08 centimeters. That looks exactly right. Oddly enough, I think the last time we saw the answer, it was 5.07. So we must have had some kind of either I have a memory error or there's a rounding issue here. Probably I have a memory error in my noggin, not in the not the memory in the computer. Okay, so this looks good, and I'm kind of liking the way this works. We pretty much have done what we want here. Okay, because let's just go look at what we said. We said we're going to refactor the previous program that converts inches to centimeters so that it does input and output in the main. Okay, it's doing input and output in the main. While doing the conversion calculation in a subfunction. Okay, and then we realize we're going to have to return a value in order to get that to work. All right, well, that looks fine to me. All right, so I've got to say that's done. Okay, and this is a short one. Okay, I'm sure you're glad to get one of those. And I'll have you doing the same thing for a similar conversion calculation in the one that you're going to do. But that's about it. And the only thing that I really want to emphasize for you is this function is more general code. It's more shareable. Okay, we don't really have the mechanism to share it well now, but in the long run, the mechanism is going to be, it's possible to create a module that just holds a bunch of common functions. In fact, a lot of the modules that come with Python have that kind of quality. And so we could, for our application, take these kind of calculations that we do a lot, and we could put them in a common module and import the module, and then we could call it. And when you're doing that, you typically don't want to mix up calculations with input-output, because you'd like to be able to mix and match. I mean, you'd like to be able to call inches to cm here when we're getting the input from the console and we're sending the output to the console. But you also like to be able to use it if you say we're in some kind of a web application and we were going to get the input from an HTML input form, and we're going to display the output on a returned HTML page. Now, if in fact we embed the input-output assumptions into our calculator function, what we really have done is we have lowered the cohesion of the function, and we have increased the coupling, because we have coupled how we do input-output to how we do the calculation. And so that makes it less useful in the long run. Okay, so this the solution that we have here, certainly inches to cm is the right size. It's only 2 lines long, and it's highly coherent, right? Because it's all about the same thing, the conversion of inches to cm. And it has low coupling because it doesn't have anything mixed into it like information about how we would like to do input-output in our other function, main. Okay? And I just want to show you the shorter version of this, which is what a lot of really coder jocks would do, is that they wouldn't even calculate some kind of a value and put it in a variable. They would say this. They would just cut that calculation out, and they would put it into, and you don't have to put whatever you return into parentheses. So let's make that change first. So why don't we back off? So first of all, we can get rid of the parens. That's not part of the syntax. It's never going to hurt, but it's not part of the syntax. So we can say that's fine. And then instead of using the name of the variable, let's just take that calculation and use it as an expression in the return statement, like that. And then line 20 really becomes redundant. We can get rid of that. And here we have a pretty typical, like very compact function that does all the calculation in the return statement. And for, very simple calculations like this is a typical use case. So again, I'm going to test it one more time. Why don't we save it? Okay, and then we're going to run it. Oh, you know what I want to do before I run it, because I think I'm done now. I want to inspect it. So let's inspect the code. Current file. Too many blank lines. Okay, 3 blank lines. Oh, let's see where this is. Let's tell it to reformat the file. And interestingly, it doesn't seem to be reformatting the file today. So why that is, I don't know. But I think it didn't like 10, 11, and 12 blank. So let's do that. And let's try it again. Let's try code, inspect code, custom, that looks good. And then, even though it hasn't cleared the messages here, look down in the lower left, no suspicious code found. Okay, so that's clean. All right, and let's run it. So let's give it a run. And let's look at it again. It's a measurement in inches, let's say 2.0. And the measurement is 5.08 centimeters. Everything working just like we wanted it. So that finally is it. We've done all the good things that we can for functions, simple functions like this, and we've shown how you pass values in with formal parameters and matching them up with actual parameters, and how we pass values up and out of call to code, which is with a return. I'll say bye until next time.